I got a question in my inbox yesterday morning, which I just knew that there'd be a massive benefit for just about everybody struggling with binge eating or bulimia, for me to take a deep dive. So I'm going to shoot a video to deep dive the question. It's all around how the hell do I get through binge urges? How do I become stronger than the binge urge? I'm going to read out the question. It was a long question, but I think you're going to resonate with the question. And then we're going to take some time to deep dive the answer. So the question was, I'm facing real struggles to control the binge urges. It's a constant battle when they come up between my rational side screaming, do not binge eat, you are full, and my animal compulsion saying, go and get that greasy food to feel better. I tried alternative coping mechanisms such as walking and talking to friends or writing down the pros and cons, but they never really work in the long run. How can I strengthen my will when faced by the hardly controllable compulsions that are seemingly way beyond the strength of my rational control? When a binge urge surges, using my rationality, it is hardly working. So how can I make my rational side stronger and more powerful than the binge urges? I feel like my reason, my rational side, keeps on being weaker than my animal compulsion related to binge urges. So there was a definite, you listen to the question and you can hear there's a clear distinction between what I want and what my body, my animal compulsion is screaming at me to do. How do I make this side stronger? We're going to deep dive the answer because it requires that. Because I mean, hey, if there was a simple answer to this, then you'd be able to fix all binge eating and bulimia within a 5-minute YouTube video. Some might argue that the answer is as simple at getting really good at. You don't control binge urges. I don't believe you ever control a binge urge, just like you can't control anger when it rises or sexual attraction. It's there. You can't stop it, right? You either got it or you don't got it. But you can get really good at riding it and getting back to your life. That's what I like to train people to do. It's not about alternative coping mechanisms. I loved that piece of the question because alternative coping mechanisms, to my mind, are used in a pinch. You have a day riddled with binge urges. All you can think about is food. You've tried as much as you can to try and get on with your life, but they just don't want to leave you alone. They keep coming back. They're getting stronger. All you can think about is indulging in that binge. Your whole body's geared for it. Then an alternative coping mechanism, breaking state, getting out for that walk, calling a friend, putting on some music, whatever it might be, definitely can work on those moments to help you ride through that very, very strong urge. However, what I prefer to work on is prevention and a simple, repeatable reaction, a new action, rather than trying to reason our way out of it, rationale our way out of it. This isn't a mind over matter. Well, no, it is kind of, because you make the decision you're going to ride through it, and then you've got to get through and implement your new behavior. And if you implement a new behavior often enough, the brain associates the new behavior with the trigger and then says, oh, right, that's what we do. So let's dive in. I'm getting a bit of my head of myself. Binge urges essentially come in 3 categories. Binge urge is triggered by hunger. You've been starving yourself, restricting, intermittent fasting. Your body's recognizing that actually you're just trying to restrict it again because you want to get that weight down. And it reacts to that, as it understandably would, by sending you these powerful urges to eat, all-consuming urges to eat, because it's recognized through years of being starved and restricted that it's got to do that to keep you alive. So it's a very clever system. And then you just even think about restricting and a binge urge can kick in. That's how powerful behavior and habit is, right? So the good news about binge urges that are hunger triggered is the way to knock them out is to you're going to practice listening to your tummy, feeding it, which can be very stressful for a lot of people. You learn to stop when you're full. That takes a lot longer to practice. You learn to give yourself exactly what your tummy asked for, not what you thought it should have, but what it actually wanted. You can welcome to give it a healthful version of that, but if it's wanting something sweet and cold, then, a piece of beef jerky is not going to do the trick. You've got to get masterful at hearing what it's asking for and honoring that. And you're welcome to make a healthful choice, although I encourage all of my clients to learn to eat the unhealthful, the stuff that they've been restricting themselves on for so long, create a new relationship with those foods and really allow themselves to see whether they actually like them. Sometimes we're so busy thinking, I'm not allowed this. We forget to taste it and see whether we're actually enjoying it. And you create a new relationship with those foods. But that's a conversation for another day. So learning to listen and honor hunger. And then the other piece that I like to help people do is keep neutrally full. So you learn to eat just enough. You don't want to be overfull. You don't want to be too hungry. A little bit of hunger is great. A little bit of fullness is fine. But you can become masterful at keeping yourself in that zone. It's not terribly exciting. Who doesn't love coming to a meal really hungry because you enjoy the meal a lot more? And I would say, you know what, you've got your rest of your life to get good at that skill later. But in recovery, it's much better to keep your body in this neutral space where it knows food's coming. It's kind of got regular times of day where it knows it's going to be fed. You're getting really good at ignoring the desire to restrict. And it knocks out those binge urges for hunger pretty damn fast. So then what are you left with? You're left with binge urges that are purely habitual. So classic time and place. You just usually binge at that particular moment in that particular place. That time of day, it's usually a binge. So there's just this wired in behavior. Even if you didn't want it, you'd seem to just do it anyway. Or event-based. So these are the classic triggers. There's a trigger, a time, a place, an event. Repeated over time, those things have created, you've binged, so your brain's got an association that goes, oh, there's the trigger, now I binge. And once you recognize that it's just a habit, that you don't even have the desire really, there's not any of that energy in it, then the trick is to get masterful at doing something different. So same time, same place, same event. And you recognize, oh, that's 5 o'clock. I usually go to the fridge. Now I'm taking this new route home and I'm going to wire that, or new route when I get home. I'm wiring that in, that new behavior, so that the habit, the time, place, event, whatever it is, trips you into a new behavior, which becomes automated. Again, once you've spotted the behavior and the sequence of events or the triggers, you go, oh, all right, those ones, it tends to be that. It's not about desire. This is just old habit. I'm going to wire in something new. And to do that, I have to stay conscious and I have to practice it repeatedly until I don't have to think about it anymore. And it's automatic that I do the new thing. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Helen, there's about 10,000 of those. Okay, well, then you're going to knock them down one at a time. But what you'll find is as you knock out the hunger ones, you'll find a lot of the binge urges go away. Then you'll be left with a few. The habitual ones are the next on the list. They're easier to tackle once you spot them. You make a conscious decision to take out, maybe you say this week or this month, I'm working on 5 p.m. Ignore all the other ones. We're just working on the 5 p.m. habit. And I'm creating this new routine. And at first, you're going to have to set alarms and remind yourself. And then eventually, the new habit kicks in, the new behavior in response to the trigger kicks in. So those are a little harder to work on than the hunger ones, but they go away pretty quickly because they didn't carry that intense energy of desire. It was more just a compulsion out of habit. And then the hardest binge urges, which is the ones that I think predominantly the person who sent me the question is talking about. When the energy is intense, it's usually paired with emotion. And once you've knocked out hunger mostly, and you're knocking out habitual ones mostly, then you start to see the patterns of emotion that are driving binge urges. Now, for somebody who might, like me, it was just about every single emotion. Happiness, excitement, fear, anxiety, boredom, loneliness. Oh, boredom, by the way, we're not going to include it as an emotion. That tends to be more habitual. I'm bored, I eat. There's no intense energy around it. Again, you can break it just by recognizing you're doing it and closing up the chip packet or whatever it is and walking away. Those are easier to rewire in the brain. The ones that are harder are when they're paired with this intense level of emotion. As I say, it's like anger. Once it's there, that binge urge is rising up in you. You can't think of anything else. It's intense. Then what to do now? Or what is the prevention with that? Once you start to recognize your patterns, even if it's all of the emotions, start with the easier ones and work towards the harder ones. What are the harder ones to get through? A sense of failure, a sense of not being enough, the sense of, oh, well, I'm a disaster anyway, so what the hell? That the emotion that comes with that. And if you've habitually gone, oh, well, I fucked up, so I may as well. The habit of making that connection, which doesn't even make sense. I'm a fuck up, so I'm going to fuck up some more. That habit is one of the harder ones to break. Seeing that you're doing it takes a while. Then trying something new takes longer. But this is why we do so much of the mental conditioning. So yeah, I could train you to just recognize it and sit with it. But those are so intense that in my experience, you might be able to get through a few of them just by sheer force of will. But the chances you're going to get through them, all of them, and without working on the actual issue is minimal, because they are so intense and so compulsive. And worse, the act of binging and or purging actually soothes the emotion. And if you want desperately not to feel something, then eventually your desire will probably kick you over the edge. So look, I mean, that is a blanket statement. Some people have this uncanny ability to just ride through those and do it enough times that they stop turning into binge urges. But most of the people that I work with will find the emotionally charged binge urges by far the harder ones. And those ones, what we do is we really become masterful at recognizing emotion, allowing it in, and having better ways of managing the emotion. And what I like about that is it's not an alternative coping mechanism. We're not trying to do something to distract ourselves from what we're going through. We're actually saying, oh, loneliness, there you are. Right, I'm going to let that in. I'm going to acknowledge that that means something really wonderful about me. We call this emotional alchemy. We essentially turn it around. We find the gold in the emotion. You know, if I'm lonely, it means that I care. It means that I'm longing for a relationship. It means that I love and I want to be loved. I find, to me, that's beautiful. Instead of going to, I'm a disaster, I'm ugly, nobody will ever love me. It's like, okay, loneliness is here. Now what? So we take a moment to find the gold in the emotion and find what and then what now is. So the question I like to ask is not what's wrong with me? Why am I broken? Why am I having these binge urges? Why aren't I strong enough to get through them? The better question is, there it is. What now? And it's always going to depend on what emotion is driving that. And I will put money on it that the person who's written me this question will have some very consistent patterns of emotion that are driving the worst of the binge urges. And once you recognize what they are, I would encourage you to actually reach out to me or into the group, because this person happens to be in a group that I run. And if you're not sure what to do with those specific emotions, let's talk about it and let's come up with new things that you can begin to practice when you begin to feel those emotions. But loneliness, for example, you can reach out. And what you begin to do is you feel the emotion, and the new behavior becomes connection. Or if you're feeling anger, then the new behavior becomes, where am I not being seen, heard, or valued? And then I'm going to express and ask for what I need. So these are things that are very unique to the individual. So they take a bit of refining. But when you get good at spotting those emotions early on and dealing with them in a way that's actually needed, not an alternative coping mechanism, but the mechanism, the action that needs to be done, it will less the intensity of the emotion and make the binge urge, if one arises, much easier to get through. Because ultimately, you have to ride out every bit. If to get to freedom, you're going to be riding out a lot of binge urges. And my favorite thing to do when the binge urges are less intense is to, especially if they're just habit driven, is dismiss them and back to work. Or back to life. I always advise my clients, if you're sitting with the binge urge, you notice you're thinking about food, you're starting to get that energy, your job is to immediately shift focus. It's a type of meditation, and get back to what you're doing. What you're saying is, I'm not engaging in that behavior. I'm training my brain to focus on what's real and present for me now. I'm not trying to do something different, an alternative coping mechanism, write a journal. No, I'm just going to go back to my what I'm doing. When the binge urges are stronger and harder, you've been trying to refocus your attention all day, the binge urge is constantly pulling at you, nagging at you, or it's a very sudden and intense binge urge that feels like it came seemingly out of nowhere, you can try a second behavior, because the behavior of refocusing your attention is a behavior. It's a mental one, but it's a behavior. The second one is a much bigger action that you're going to be taking. Binge eating and purging are actions. And the way to overcome action is with a new action, not with thought. It's only so much that's going to work, as we all know, right? You can be saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, as much as you want. But the best way to defeat action is with action. And so one of the things you can do is when you notice a binge urge coming, have the exact same behavior that you do every single time. And it needs to be quick, effective, and something that you can practice so often that you don't have to think about it. It's going to be the same one. And what I advise people is it's a state break. As soon as you notice that desire, walk outside. Don't walk into the kitchen, for goodness sakes. Get outside, get into the next room, get into the bathroom. Make it a very specific place, because we tend to be in the same places. We're creatures of habit. You know, when it's at home, where do you go? When it's at work, where do you go? If you're at a restaurant, go to the bathroom. Maybe not always the best idea for somebody who's been vomiting, okay? If you're at a restaurant, step outside. It might seem odd to some of your friends and family, and you know what, that's okay. I need a breath of fresh air. I'm stepping outside. If they need an explanation, you can make something up or tell them the truth. But ultimately, your job is to get really good at when you notice it's really intense, walk to get somewhere else. And you can use a Mel Robbins trick here, where she says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you go do it. So the minute you feel that intensity, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you stand up, and when the minute you hear 1, you stand up and you walk outside. What you're doing is you're training your brain to do a new behavior when it feels that energy. And because the brain's not getting what it actually wanted, which was the dopamine and the rush of serotonin through binging and or purging, now it's going to kind of be like, well, that wasn't so fun, and the urges should dissipate. But the real prevention on the urges is coming through the actions you do beforehand, like feeding yourself, and working on this mindset, getting really good at managing emotions. That's where the practice of binge urge busting, in a way, is really happening. It's in those day-to-day practices. It's happening way more there than it is in actually trying to get through one when it hits. That's 10 times harder. But just 2 quick solutions is get your attention back on what you're doing, no matter what it was, or get in the habit, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, up and out, and get very clear on exactly where you're going. Don't leave it to chance. And if you want, you can practice that right now. You could make a decision and run through the scenario in your head of having a binge urge, and you're 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 out of there. And if you want to remind yourself to do it, put 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 written in your kitchen. Maybe put it in your office, or put it in your bedroom, or wherever you predominantly, or in the sitting room, wherever you predominantly get binge urges. Put that piece of paper with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to remind you what you need to do when they hit. So make that behavior identical every single time. So we're not trying to come up with 10 different things to do, just one. Either refocus your attention on what you're doing, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get outside. You choose now what it is that it's going to work for you. For me, just refocusing, getting masterful at shifting my energy. The minute I noticed I was starting to think about food, starting to think about binging, I just got back into what I was doing. And at a pinch, I would use an alternative coping mechanism if I was really struggling. But just doing that was enough to start knocking a lot of them off. But if you find that that's not working for you, I would go for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, up and out. Yeah, super useful little trick. I just want to take a moment to get back to the prevention piece. Prevention isn't just about mindset and body love. Prevention is super practical. Binge urges often hit because we're thirsty, we're hungry, we've spoken about, we're tired. We're more likely to be emotional when we're tired as well. These are basic kind of tenets of health that we need to look after. So I love to encourage my clients to create a morning routine that smashes your basic health bits all in one. And of course, we all know health levers all in one. We all know that the best morning routine, we don't all know, starts the night before. So your sleep is ultra important. If you're struggling to sleep, you need to invest in as many sleep, um, I want to say like facilities. It's not that. Find the book, find the coach, find the mentor, find the natural healthy supplement. If it's melatonin or whatever it might be, find what works for you to help you sleep better. And sometimes it's as simple as setting an alarm and making sure you're turning off your phone at 9:30 and you get your ass in bed. And again, like anything, practice, 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 practice until you can't fail to achieve it, right? Until it's wired in and it would feel weird to stay up later. Sleep is so important. It's so boring and unsexy, but it's so important to get a good night's rest. The chances of you having binge urges after a great night's sleep, minimal, yeah? Less emotional, blah, 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 blah. Your body's healed much better, all of these good things. The other thing is thirst. First thing in the morning, make sure you got some water. Get some water in you so that you're knocking that out of the equation. And water with electrolytes is great for energy. So again, it's just knocking out the exhaustion component. Those kind of measures, you can build them into your daily routine. Doing your daily movement practice. A lot of you are over-exercising, so I may not even have to mention exercise. But if you're not somebody who enjoys exercise, I can't encourage you enough. It's not only great for helping with minimizing binge urges, but it's actually incredible for all sorts of health. Just like sleep, it's up there. Sleep, sunshine, sleep, fresh air, physical activity, and good quality food. These are kind of the tenets of health, as is social connection. It's so important, and we kind of take it for granted. We think that we're looking for these amazing miracle cures for stuff, when actually, just getting some sunshine, getting some D, getting a glass of water in every day, making sure you're connecting with somebody once a day, making sure you're prioritizing your sleep and getting good rest, and getting good physical activity. And do those 5 things, prioritize those, your recovery is going to be 10 million times easier. So prevention, prevention, prevention. And of course, the food piece is knocking out the hunger with regular eating and staying nice and comfortable. You see how this is a big, big question? Because I wish it was just, well, you just do this thing and then they all go away. But it isn't. It's more than that, because you're going to have to work on the prevention and getting through them. And together, you kind of got this exponential curve that begins to grow and get easier and easier and easier. And you just get fewer and fewer binge urges. And even if you get one, you'll just be like, oh, there's a binge urge. And you'll know exactly what to do because you've trained yourself thousands upon thousands of times. And it just gets super easy to get through them. So big answer to a big question. I loved the question, but I think the big takeaway I would love for you to take from this is we tend to think of ourselves as weak. You heard that in the question, the feeling of I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, what's wrong with me? Why can't my rational mind win out on the animal compulsion? It's not about reason. The women I work with, and I have no doubt that the person who sends me the question is identical. They are strong-willed, disciplined, hardworking women. They're mothers, they're career women. It's just unbelievable, the level of discipline. So the chances are that this is the one area where you're kind of useless. It's just doesn't make sense. You have a strong will. You've potentially not had the right set of tools. But beating yourself up with the I'm too weak, I can't make my reason strong enough, is actually a flawed kind of argument or a flawed question, because your reason is powerfully strong. The problem is the actions, the behaviors that have been wired into the brain, paired up with a ton of dopamine over the years, is that's like unplayable. So the way you attack this, it's through prevention and learning how to get through them very, very effectively. And your prevention, just to recap, making sure you're well fed, knock out the hunger one, leaning into that. And that's a huge piece for most people in recovery. That's not so easy to do if you haven't been doing it so long. And if you're struggling with that, reach out to me. This is what I teach. Then make sure you've got a morning routine that includes sunshine, water, physical activity, social connection. Get all those basic health levers, knocked on the head, fresh air, deep breaths, all in one go. And make sure your morning routine has started the night before by good quality sleep. Then you're going to dedicate practice to things like turning the mindset around that got you in trouble in the first place, learning radical self-acceptance, learning to get through and get masterful at spotting those emotions that are tripping you up, and having better ways of dealing with those emotions, not alternative coping mechanisms, but actual coping mechanisms. And then finally, you're going to, is there finally? No, that was it. And then that's the prevention piece, right? So you're working on those very intentionally. You're scheduling, working on that in a morning routine is a priority. And then you're adding on these additional areas. And this is unique for everybody that need work, the mental bits that need work, the emotional pieces that need work, and healing. And you're adding that in as part of the recovery journey. It's a big journey. And at the same time, you're practicing these little tips and techniques around how to get through binge urges. So as I say, refocusing your energy and attention is one, and getting up and out of there is another. There's a third piece that I talk about in a video that I think I've also got on YouTube, which is about pairing the new behavior with a high level of dopamine. And since shooting that video, I've discovered that dopamine is actually the more molecule, so they call it. It's the molecule that tells your brain, I want more of this, right? So we know that from having compulsions to do exercise or compulsions to binge eat. So why not use that knowledge and find ways to pair up high levels of dopamine and reward with the new behavior? Now, a lot of you are going to skip this piece, but actually it's so powerful because the dopamine is signaling to your brain that this is something it needs to learn, that this is something that it wants more of. It's a pleasure molecule, it's the more molecule, and it wants more of that. And if it's associating it with this new behavior that you're doing, it's going to call you to do the new behavior more. So think of dopamine as the more molecule, and the way you give yourself a ton of dopamine, at the very least, when you break the habit, when you've noticed that you've got through the binge urge, is to reward yourself with a ton of internal high fives and hoo-has. And that sounds super stupid and it sounds very cheesy, but you know what, it works. And if I were you, I'd take that on board. Now we can take it a step further, and you can reward yourself with money, as I did for every binge urge I got through. You can reward yourself with compliments or whatever. Come up with something that inspires you. For some people, it's as simple as giving themselves ticks or smiley faces every time they get through a binge urge. Come up with something that's going to powerfully reward you for getting through the urge. So you're going to get really good at preventing the urges from coming up in the first place, and you're going to get masterful at rolling through them and riding them when they hit. Because remember, we can't control them, but we can get good at riding them and making sure they pass through quickly, and then eventually they stop coming. So very long answer to a wonderful question. Thanks so much for sending it in. For any of you who are watching this and wondering how the hell to get hold of me and send me a question, just email me, coach@bulimiafreedom.com. I'll put that in the comments below, in the information below. Or join me in the Bulimia Freedom Fighters. You can find me on Facebook, or go to bulimiafreedom.com. Everything you need to know is there. And I would love to meet you one day and to help you on this journey. So I hope you found that video valuable. I know you might be finding it a bit overwhelming and thinking, good grief, Helen, this is a lot of stuff to work on. And yes, it is. But you know what? Every mountain is climbed with, you start with a few steps and you will get there. And the more dedicated the practice, the more you prioritize this, the more you're working on the right strategies, not the wrong ones. You're going up the right mountain, not down into a further ditch. And the more you combine all of this work with a group of people who are in it with you, who understand you, support you, are cheering you on, who are holding you accountable, the better. Pile on the work, because getting through an eating disorder is really no different to getting through a powerful addiction. One could argue that an eating disorder is an addiction. I certainly believe that. However, I don't think this is one of those once you're an addict, always an addict addictions. To my mind, a disorder is fully recoverable And in fact, you can do better than that and create freedom. And that's when you feel completely free of the fear that you are going to trip and fall into that again. And if any of you used to struggle with suicidal depression and are now living in a space where you might have your days that are hard, but you're not worried you'll ever be feeling suicidal again, that's the kind of freedom I'm talking about. If any of you have struggled with binge drinking and have managed to get through that, and now you couldn't be bothered with the thought of having a drink, that's the kind of freedom you can have around food. And if you're not there yet with food, which I'm imagining you're not if you've watched this video, then know that it's potentially one of the biggest challenges of your life, but it's also the most rewarding, because on the other side of this journey are friendships and connection and a self-understanding that's next level, and the ability to create your life, to begin to make choices and create your life, not just be at the mercy of it, because that's what recovery truly asks us to do, is to begin to stand up and choose and create and be mindful about what we're doing. And that, I'm telling you, that alone, you walk away from recovery just with that, you can then use it in every other part of your life, from career to relationships, anything that you put your mind to. You begin to realize that you have power over your thoughts and over your actions. And once you see that you've got a bad habit of thought or action, you've already learned what you need to do. The principles are the same. You will choose new thoughts and new actions, and then you will wire them in through repetition, 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 until that becomes the new norm. You can apply it to any part of your life. Does it take time? Yes. Is it frustrating? Yes, it is. Will you want to give up on whatever it is that you're working on? Yes. But the magic is in pushing through and being relentless, and those incremental improvements that you'll be tracking and gaining all the time. I often ask, what do you win? What are the wins today? We don't just want to hear what didn't work for you. I want to hear what worked for you. Do more of that. And they keep clocking up until they start stacking on each other and things get easier and easier. And then what happens? You have a better quality problem or a new challenge, and you take that on. So thank you for listening. Reach out to me if you need to, and I'll be in touch with you soon.